Good evening. It's been a rough week here. Welcome to Between the Lines. Well, happy Thanksgiving to everybody. It's Thanksgiving night. We're with Congressman Fleischmann, who's flown in from Mar-a-Lago after being in D.C. for a couple weeks, fighting the good fight for all of us. I was under the cutter's knife, so I had to get some cells removed, but I'm doing fine, and we're ready to go tonight. We've been 4 days since I got cut. It's only been 4 hours since you landed in Knoxville. So welcome, Congressman, to our semi-annual show. I'm so self-conscious. My semi-annual show, so we got a lot to talk. We will. Yeah. We're going to have dinner tonight. We're going to do good. I'm going to ask you a few questions and let you just start talking.
Sure. Hello, happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
There he is. There he is.
Two hours in Knoxville. We just landed and they picked me up. But
brought you up.
It's great to be
You were
back.
Down in Florida?
I was down in Florida.
Seeing Mr. Trump, President Trump. How's he doing?
President Trump last night, and I had dinner. We had a wonderful, 2 hours together down there with my friend Gus Bilirakis at Mar-a-Lago. Yes, and the new Speaker of the House was there.
Good. Johnson was down?
Johnson, Mike was there, and so we just had a really nice visit.
Mike gets along with everybody, it seems like.
He does.
I mean, he's a very conservative fellow, but he's a very bright fellow.
Very bright, good constitutional lawyer, but we just really had a great talk about things. And
he did the amicus brief for the Supreme Court for President Trump. I remember that.
I signed on to that, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, I remember several people.
126. But it's good to be back in East Tennessee with you and with our great listeners.
Well, good. We have a lot of people. We've changed we're on have a lot of social media presence, but we're also on channel 186 now. So is it 1086 channel? Yeah. 1086. I moved everybody up. All the Anderson County Television. About 5 or 6 of us up there. Oak Ridge, TV. They moved all the nonprofits to a plane up there. So that's where we are now. Except, I'll give you, Cofield played Oliver Springs, lost actually, upset by Oliver Springs in the playoffs.
Wow.
Just like Oak Ridge got beat by Clinton, upset the week before.
My.
But on the Cofield Oliver Springs game, in which you were kind enough to sponsor the instant replays, we had 6,800 people watch on social media.
So 6,800 people saw the Chuck Fleischmann instant replay.
He's so great. Those announcers are so good to you too.
They are.
We have less, and they audio it mostly now, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so let's talk. There's a lot. It's Thanksgiving Day. We have a lot to be thankful for.
Yes.
In this country, I have a number of subjects I want to cover. I think we covered domestic stuff. We have 2 hours this week and next. Obviously, we'll film it all today. No secrets there. But we'll give you the domestic part first, and then we'll do some Iraq and some Iran and Israel, and next week we'll talk about the Ukraine and Russia.
Sure.
There's some disseminating support for Ukraine. It's getting expensive, but there's a double. You'll be able to explain to us better, maybe answer the hypothesis why we should continue to fund the Iraq, where you know much about being on foreign relations committees and stuff of that nature. Tell me this. Let's start out with the budget crisis. I want you just to talk for a while and explain to us where we're at, what's going on, and what we can expect.
It's an excellent question. And Alan, I'm glad you raised that, because when I start talking budget in rooms, even with sophisticated business people, it's like, well, where are you starting from and where are you ending? The reality is the federal government has an annual budget. That begins October the 1st. And ends on September the 30th. So the fiscal year for 2024 actually began October the 1st of this year. The reality was and is that the parties, the House and the Senate and the White House, were not ready to put things together. So a continuing resolution was put in place until mid-November.
Let me ask a question right there. Let's talk about the 8 congressmen that blocked everything from happening.
Okay.
That's not fair to them. Blocked passage, not only of a recall on a speaker, but of getting the budget through based on their concerns, which are legitimate long-term concerns.
Yes.
About overspending, not having a budget in place, et cetera. So the CR for the 8th out of 10th time, we always get a CR.
Well, Alan, two issues. Budget separate. There were more than 8 who actually were against the budget. Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
There were only 8 who were against the Speaker McCarthy, and they voted to vacate.
But there were 8 that.
But
how many people voted not to make the CR work, not to bridge it?
Oh my gosh. Tens of them.
You supported that bridge.
I did. In fact, I think David Kustoff and I were the only 2 Republicans in the state of Tennessee to vote for this stopgap measure.
I get the
probably-
politics of it, but
probably
what good is
10s.
shutting the government down?
That you're absolutely right.
That makes no
I always
sense.
vote to keep the government open.
Right.
First of all, when you shut it down, the preparation for the shutdown costs the taxpayer money. When you're in shutdown, it costs the taxpayer money. When you open back up, it costs the taxpayer money. And you literally lose millions of hours of work from people who, through no fault of their own, are told, go home, the federal government is closed, but we always do, rightfully, pay them back
Right.
for their missed time, but they didn't do the work because they were told to go home. So that's a bad scenario. But to answer,
But don't they get their money back later?
yes,
Okay.
everybody gets their money back. The workers do, but we lose those hours. They don't have to work those hours. It's not their fault. They're told to go home. The government's shutting down. So I always vote to try to keep the government open. That's very important. Now, we need to get fiscally sound. Going back to the budget. So right now, we have a situation where on January the 19th, under this new continuing resolution, let's call it what it is, and be candid, 4 of the 12 appropriation bills, including my bill,
For energy.
which is
So
the
we'll
energy.
qualify that by saying that you are the chairman.
Yes. I'm the Cardinal, the chairman of the Energy and Water Subcommittee of Appropriations. I wrote that bill. That is an excellent bill for our great friends here in Oak Ridge, actually for the great state of Tennessee, and I think the country. But that will be up in the 4 bills that are going to go January 19th. The rest of the 8 bills will go on February the 2nd. Now, bear this in mind, and we have to be candid. This is not a job well done because the fiscal year will end September 30th. So we're actually operating under a continuing resolution, if you will, last year's budget, all the way through now, obviously until January 19th, and then February the 2nd.
And
will get
what
it
happens
done.
with new appropriations? We need to send $300 million to Israeli aid. There was none last year, so are we allowed to send that this year because it's not a CR-related item?
It's an excellent question. We are going to attempt, and I hope we are successful, to do something called a supplemental. Now, a supplemental in terms of budget, it can be for foreign assistance to Israel. It could be for disaster release. Supplemental is something that it's almost like a family budget. You thought everything was going good. You have your family budget together, but then the car breaks down and you need to go buy another car. Right?
There you go.
So what happens, something in the world happens, and you need to actually come up with additional funds. The House, the Senate, and the White House all have to approve that. That is actually outside the budget. That's why it's called a supplemental.
All right, so I'm in a construction phase. What's a good example? UPF's a good example. So
UPF.
UPF, they're funded $300 or $400 million last year, but this year we're getting closer to construction and stuff. So this year's budget, maybe 700 or 800. They're limited in a CR to spend the money that was in last year's CR or any other new project like UPF. Correct.
That is correct.
So they run out of money eventually.
They do within the fiscal year. As a matter of fact, due to a lot of problems that they faced here at UPF, what I did, I actually reapportioned money. Now, we did not increase the amount of money in the budget, but I was actually able to move over $200 million to make sure that UPF stayed fully funded. I did that under my authority as chairman of the Energy and Water Subcommittee. I did that with my Democratic counterpart in the House and my Republican and Democratic counterpart in the Senate. We did that twice. Why? They were going to run out of money. I did not want them to close down. We had inflationary costs. We had supply chain issues. CNS, in my view, does a very good job. They run Y12, and they're doing the UPF. For our listeners, that's the uranium processing facility. I broke ground on that, probably over a decade ago. It was supposed to be $6.5 billion done by 2025. Because of inflation and COVID and all that, it'll
That's when our
probably
buddy
run
John
about,
Eisenberg was there, right? Yeah.
That's right. It'll probably be about 8 or 9 billion, and probably I'm hoping 2026, 2027, but will be critically important.
It's pretty optimistic.
Oh, yes. Well, to our nation's nuclear arsenal, it's needed.
Oh,
Yes.
given
So
domestic.
you've got budgets, you've got anomalies,
Right.
you've got supplementals, and we will get a budget deal done next time. Otherwise, you end up having a year-long CR, which nobody wants.
We spend the same money we spent last year.
Right.
With a few anomalies, like
A few
Israel and a
anomalies.
few things like that.
That's exactly right. And we'll probably get a supplemental, I believe, on Israel and on Ukraine, I would say probably before the end of the year.
Let's look at the, before we talk about the energy bill, let's talk about the domestic budget for a second.
Yes.
I mean, what has changed? What's the same? Where's the needs? We'll talk about energy in the next segment, but tell me, when you look at the overall budget as the United States Congressman, what do you see changing? Monies?
Sure.
I'm a Republican and I'm a fiscal conservative, but I can see a need for increased taxes, well, let me rephrase that, increased revenue taxes if absolutely necessary.
Well, I don't ever want to raise taxes. I believe like John Kennedy did and Ronald Reagan did and Donald Trump does, that if you reduce taxes, the government will actually get more revenue. Now, that sounds a little bit strange, but what you do is you reduce taxes on the producers, and they go out and they produce more, and guess what? You actually get more revenue in the coffers. That's actually been proven.
Let me play the other side of that coin. If in fact, the wealthy people that make the most money off of those type of issues, the owners actually invest that money either back into the infrastructure or buy enough yachts to stimulate the economy.
And they do. People spend, and people do reinvest. Having said that, domestic needs. The world has changed, Alan, and we can talk about this in either this show or next week's show. But defense needs. We were in a position where the world had gotten more dangerous. Russia invaded Ukraine. China is looming as the big threat in its part of the world. Wanting to expand its influence, and it is expanding its influence. They are eyeing Taiwan. I don't know what that looks like in a year or 5 years, but the world's gotten much more dangerous. Then, of course, the Middle East just blew up with the radical Hamas horrible terrorist attack in Israel, which now has created literally a war over there, which I hope and pray doesn't escalate, but that's where the world is right now. What does that mean? That means the United States needs to keep its domestic defense budget up. The Department of Energy, which is my bill, which is what we do here in the great city of Oak Ridge, encompasses our nuclear arsenal. A lot of folks don't realize this, even members of Congress. The NNSA, which is part of the Department of Energy, actually is in charge of procuring and making and keeping our nation's nuclear arsenal safe. The customer still is the Department of Defense, or this is the Navy, the Air Force, but NNSA through DOE does that, and Oak Ridge is big in that, huge. And probably the key player of all the reservations, I would say. Now, we have some other very good defense labs, but Oak Ridge is key. Having said that, every year there are increased needs and I think decreased needs on the domestic side. The problem is our friends on the other side of the aisle, the Democrats, always want to see domestic non-defense spending increased, okay, on everything. They want to get, yeah, and I disagree with them, but that's their ethos, right? And they run that way. They win in some districts, not the 3rd District, Tennessee, that way, but let's face it, that's how they go out and they campaign, and that's how they vote. The reality is our budgets have grown now well over $1 trillion on the domestic side.
How large was it when you took office in 2010?
Gosh, it was if it was 600 or 700 billion. That's right, 600-700 billion. But now we have had times where we've approached that, but we're spending well over 100% of GDP domestically. But I can talk about that all day. The real spending problem is on the mandatory spending problems, and nobody wants to touch that. Republicans, Democrats, presidential candidates, House candidates, Senate candidates, but there's a little bit of hope out there. Now, for our listeners, what is mandatory spending? Ladies and gentlemen, mandatory spending is now close to 75% of the federal budget.
Which is debt.
Okay. Well, it's spending on Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, interest on the national debt, the vast majority of the Affordable Care Act. I'm not going to make any comments about touching that, cutting that, and the like. That's off the table. But the sheer reality is we don't appropriate. People come up to me all the time. You are the most powerful person in Tennessee because you're the appropriator. You're the appropriator. That is true for 25% of the budget. 75% of it automatically happens.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's where we're actually running up our
But,
huge
and I'm not asking you to
deficits.
commit, because I understand
Sure.
the political ramifications.
Sure.
But when I was young, which was a long time ago, 20s and 20.
You and me both.
When
We're
Hey, you're
contemporaries.
catching, you're 8
catching
years
up.
behind, but, or 7 or 8. But the bottom line is, we made an increase in Social Security with either Medicare or withholding of 0.5% or something back in the 80s, right? Early 80s.
They've done it several times.
So here's the
Good
question.
stuff, yeah.
If you're 65, 55 or over, 60 or over, or whatever the number is, you don't get touched. Okay, here's my proposal. But if you're under that, it's time to boot it 0.5% and pay more.
Well, I think there's a lot of different things that could be looked at. Let me give you some hope without getting into any specifics.
Right.
The Republicans came up with an idea now that even Democrats are starting to warm to, and this is what it is. As part of the next budget deal,
Right.
we agree as Republicans and Democrats, as members of the House and members of the Senate, to create an active bipartisan commission next year.
Okay.
After the national election, because let's face it,
Yeah.
whether it's Biden or Trump, they're not going to touch it.
No.
Okay?
No.
Why? Because we can't scare seniors. We can't do that. We don't want to do that. But as soon as somebody says, hey, let's talk about reform, people get concerned. So it won't happen this budgetary cycle. But as part of a budget deal, a commission of active House and Senate members, Republicans and Democrats, to come up with ideas so that we can save and preserve Social Security and Medicare. And then the harder one, probably, the first two are going to be relatively easy. The third one is going to be Medicaid. That's where the real partisan differences come out.
Sure.
Because Republicans and Democrats pretty well work together on Social Security and Medicare, okay? Medicaid, the Dems really want to bolster that. Republicans want to be a little bit more on the constraint side, so that would have to play out. But, ladies and gentlemen, that's 75% of our federal budget, and it's going to grow. In 1980, okay, we talked about the 80s. In 1980, I started college. The federal budget, 25% of the federal budget was mandatory. Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, interest on the national debt. 75% of it was appropriated, was on the discretionary
Now it's
side.
flipped.
It is flipped around, and it's going to continue that way. What does that mean? That means the discretionary side is going to continue to get squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. We're going to run deficits either way, but let's hopefully we could sit down and work something out as a nation, working together to curb a $33 trillion debt. When I went to Congress, okay, we asked about what the budget was. We were $15 trillion in debt.
Is that a confession? Or is that
That's an outrage.
Yeah.
That's an outrage. We are now 33.6 trillion in debt. And I'll tell you, people say, why do you get mad at President Obama and the like? The thing that he did worse, I was in the room. He had the guts to come into a room with Republicans. There's the only Democrat in the room. He sat there with us and John Boehner, and he talked with us. I had a bad attitude that day, and he kept talking about, well, you all don't like me. He's like, no, forget that. You're the President of the United States. Let's talk. John Boehner made him an offer. He said, let's go big on mandatory spending. You're a second-term Democrat. You're in the best position to do it. You won't scare people. We will work with you. And he said, I assure you, Mr. President, that it won't look like we want it to look like. It won't look like what you want it to look like. But if we can come up with something that can put something together fiscally to deal with it. I'll never forget, President Obama sat there, he thought, and then he just basically told us, he said, well, the deficit and the national debt were not that important to him. And it was off the table. Very disappointing. We could have done something.
Interesting.
Yep.
Interesting. So,
True story. I was there.
you know, let's talk about student debt while we're on that percent. Where are we at on student debt? Biden introduced it, then he pulled it back.
Yes.
Now he's inching in. What I've read seems reasonable. They're doing a little bit here and a little bit there, but
Well, the reality is, this is my view, people need to pay their debts.
yes.
It was and of course, why does he even have the ability to do this? Because of the Affordable Care Act, the federal government took over federal debt. It used to be federal student debt. It used to be in the private sector. That could never happen. I think it's a political gimmick. I think it's a political ploy by him. The courts spanked him. He didn't pull it back. The courts spanked him, and then he's
That's
trying.
right, Supreme Court rule, yeah.
He's trying again, and in some reasonable ways, he's had some success. But the reality, I think, for those who've either paid off their debt or made the decision not to go into debt. A lot of people said, look, I'd love to go to college. I can't afford it, so I won't go out and borrow this money. I'll go to work. I think this is one of the worst givebacks ever. It's wrong. It outrages people. Biden thinks it's going to help him with the younger people in the election. He is below water big time with younger voters. It is amazing.
Yeah, I've read that. I've done some polling too. That's right.
I'm going to be candid. That shocked me, that younger voters are abandoning him. African American voters are abandoning him. Hispanic voters are abandoning him. But guess who he's keeping? He's keeping senior citizens.
Yeah, that's right.
And that is like, how does that happen?
But those are real Dems, some of those older seniors.
Yeah,
go
but
away.
and I'm being as candid as I
Like
can.
his city's Oak
I
Ridge
mean,
is a great example.
yeah.
If you took everybody over 70 years old in the city, there are more Democrats than Republicans.
Wow.
But if you take everybody in the city and you take everybody in the county, there's a lot more Republicans. Young people don't want to, I'm not talking about urban Seattle or Milwaukee
Sure.
or Nashville or Washington or Boston. I mean, those are urban centers, and those are cultural centers that bring people that have the same interest alike, and they're more progressive, and they'll vote for whoever the progressive is, Democrat is. But I think in a lot of areas, you're right. People graduating college, going to work, doing things, and Biden, in some ways, President Biden. I don't mean to be disrespectful.
No, not at all.
President Biden, in some ways, him. And this goes for the Senate leader. This goes for McConnell, others. Schumer, they've gotten to this point where they've gotten old enough, it's nature, it's not their fault, to where they just don't have any appeal to young people. I mean, I don't see it. I mean, you see it and then you think, well, I think if you had somebody else, if you had Newsom from California, he would run well with young people, and he's probably more liberal than Joe.
He's
President
far
Biden.
more liberal than Joe.
Yeah,
and
that's
and
right.
he's almost socialistic. It's horrific.
But I always brag on Nancy Pelosi because not politics, no, I understand, but Nancy holds them together. You guys were falling apart with 8 over here. And 3 over
I will tell you.
Hers are going boom, 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 standing there.
She ran that house with an iron fist. I think she hurt the country, but she ran her caucus. Those Dems paid attention. You would have never seen happen to Nancy Pelosi what happened to Kevin McCarthy.
No, never.
Republicans need more discipline. I mean, the Democrats, candidly, they're a much more disciplined party.
Well, there's more retribution.
Oh, yes.
You don't serve if you don't serve.
That's exactly right.
I mean, I have respect for that.
I've seen that.
I've been in the business a long time.
And
I think Kevin tried to do some of that, but
he tried.
Boehner did better with that, I think.
Boehner did better, but Boehner could always reach across the aisle and get 20 Dems to vote with him. Those 20 Dems are not there anymore. It's gotten so polarized. I mean, there's probably one blue dog Dem left.
Wow.
Yep.
It's getting there, isn't it? Let's take a break, Chen. I'm ready to go to break, and we'll be right back with Congressman Chuck Fleischmann.
Daniel Forrester has been trusted by Anderson County families for nearly 2 decades. Daniel has appeared in Anderson County Chancery, Circuit, Sessions, and Juvenile Court thousands of times over the past decade. A Rule 31 mediator, Daniel has been trusted to mediate hundreds of cases across Anderson County. A community leader, Daniel has worked closely with local officials to make Anderson County a better place. A conservative and dedicated husband and father, Daniel's faith has shaped his character and integrity. On March 5th, vote Daniel Forrester for Anderson County Chancellor.
From Oak Ridge, Tennessee, IB3 Global Solutions conducts operations around the world to enhance the U.S. national security posture and minimize radiological and nuclear threats. IB3 Global Solutions. Mission first.
Fan Gear Barn is Oak Ridge's source for new and vintage sports fan gear from around the world of sports. Find your favorite team gear at Fan Gear Barn, located at 977 Oak Ridge Turnpike, across from the hospital. Open 10 a.m. to 7 p.m., 6 days a week. Closed on Sundays.
At Navarro, we partner with our clients to advance clean energy and deliver effective solutions for complex challenges in the nuclear and environmental fields.
When should you get tested for COVID-19? You have symptoms of COVID-19, such as runny nose, congestion, sore throat, fever, cough, shortness of breath, muscle pain, headache, chills, or loss of taste or smell. Current testing recommendations say everyone should get tested immediately if they have symptoms of COVID-19. If you have symptoms, be sure to follow recommendations about how long to stay home and away from others. For more information, visit our If You Are Sick or Test Positive webpage.
All right, crew, let's get started. All right.
Don't ignore the law. You must call 811 at least 2 to 3 days before any digging project so you can avoid hitting our essential buried utilities. For digging projects big or small, make the call to 811.
Welcome back to Between the Lines. Happy Thanksgiving again to everybody. It's Thanksgiving night. We're here with Congressman Chuck Fleischmann, and we're talking about all things America, domestic America. Next week, we're going to talk about all things international. We're going to see where America fits in the global solutions. I want to say thanks to Daniel Forrester, our good friend, big supporter of yours. Daniel is running, but of course, you can't do that anymore since he's a judge. You know that word. So
nice guy, good lawyer.
Yeah, a good guy. Just a good guy. And he's been sponsoring us all year, and we really appreciate his help. Okay, so we've talked money a little bit, and we've talked budgeting a little bit. Tell us a little bit about how you put together. You're now the chairman. $58 billion roughly, be more this year.
Well done. You got it right.
I was excited. I looked it up when you got it. More money to cut, right?
Yeah.
But the $58 billion national budget for energy across, and you now are responsible for putting together write the bills with your staff to fund all of the different sites across the country. From Sandia to Brookhaven to Los Alamos to...
That is correct. On the Department of Energy side, there's two big parts to this bill.
Okay.
First of all, there's the Department of Energy,
Right.
which you alluded to, all the DOE reservations, the civil side plus the NNSA side, which we talked about, our nation's nuclear arsenal. The great thing about Oak Ridge, and whether I'm in Washington, D.C., Tennessee, California, or in Rome, Italy, I talk about Oak Ridge, and everybody's like, wow, that is the center of everything. It really is that we do. So we've got that. We also have the entire Army Corps of Engineer budget, which is large. This is all these large works projects all over the country. We have one in the 3rd District of Tennessee, the Chickamauga Lock, which is 70 to 75% complete. We also have the Bureau of Reclamation, which is out west primarily. So it's a good portfolio. It's been fascinating to be chairman. This is my first time as chairman. I've been ranking member, which means when Republicans were in the minority, I was the ranking member actually on Homeland Security Appropriations. I'm an appropriator. That's a very different role from anybody else in the House in Tennessee. And although I will say this, I talk about the fact that I chair Energy and Water. I've got the second seat on Labor, Education, Health, and Human Services Appropriations. That's healthcare, NIH, CDC, all the cancer research. I love that stuff. Then I have State and Foreign Operations, which we'll talk about later, where we do our funding of foreign aid and we fund our embassies and things like that. But the former speaker came to me at the beginning of the year and said, Fleischmann, I want you to go back on the Science Committee, which made a lot of people in this city, in Oak Ridge, very pleased. I was a little bit hesitant to do that because I'm so busy being an appropriator, but I did it because the speaker asked. So now I'm an appropriator and an authorizer, which is very rare. The only way I tell my sports friends is I'm offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator.
Yeah,
but I still
but
only
you're
score
only
touchdowns.
defensive coordinating on special teams.
That's exactly right.
Science isn't a big margin.
That is a better metaphor. I like that. That's exactly right.
That's where we're
I'll
at.
return one for a touchdown every once in a while on the other side.
Well,
That's
science
right.
is important. It's got a lot of research
Science is
money out there.
important.
What's your budget in science?
I don't know. What their budget
because you're
is.
not on
Well,
that
well,
side.
yeah, and that's an authorizing committee. So
that is an authorizing committee.
We'd fill in the blanks there. But love my job. Love the people I represent. I have 10 counties now.
Yes,
Anderson and
I thought we had
Rome.
11. Who did we lose?
We lost Union.
That's right, we did lose. Our good
redistricting.
friend up there,
Yeah, but
Judge Edmondson.
Yes, indeed. Loved Union County. I flew up back to Knoxville today with somebody from Union, and they said they missed me, and I appreciated that.
So that's right, it's 10.
Yes,
And I
it's
work,
10.
and I do consulting work about 7 of them, 8 of them.
Yes,
So
you do.
It's a broad rural county.
And it's a big district. It's border to border. But I will say this: I've got all of Bradley County now, which I started my congressional career with all of Bradley. It's a great county. It's about 110, 115,000.
118, I think. Yeah. I'm down there now a lot. Yeah.
Now Hamilton is 375.
Yeah.
So, but Anderson and Roane put together is a big chunk, and of course,
About 25% of your district.
yes. And I just love the city of Oak Ridge. And Alan was talking about before that. Well, there's a lot of Democrats here and Republicans and independents, but I carry the city of Oak Ridge, the love I feel here when I walk the streets, because I help our working people. I help everybody.
It's interesting. You get a lot of advocacy in local elections.
Yes.
We saw it last year. Tremendous Democrats running as independents did very, very well on county commissions and city councils and stuff. But, Biden narrowly beat Trump in Oak Ridge. It was like 100 votes or something. It was like ridiculous. I mean, it was really. I don't remember the exact amount. And I don't remember. You got to add Roane County in and stuff too. But
Sure.
it was closer than I thought it would be.
Understood.
And I'll bet when I break my polling down, I poll all over Tennessee. But when I break my polling down, you'll see more people. The people in 35 to 55, they're voting Republican.
Sure. They are. And the dynamic here for me has always been, that I love Oak Ridge. I actually carry the city of Oak Ridge, but then I run up big margins in Anderson and Roane counties.
Roane, big support. We got
Yes.
some people over there who are. It's a very conservative. Yeah. President Trump polls very strongly over there. Very strongly in Anderson, really, except for Oak Ridge, very strong. And
for the folks watching, Alan was instrumental in my very first primary campaign. This is the bare bones truth. Yeah. I won this election in Anderson and Roane counties. Yes. And it surprised everybody.
We worked really hard too.
We worked hard.
A lot of people worked hard.
And it was good. And out of the blue, on election night, we started out very far behind in Hamilton County, and then we were not doing well in the southern counties. We actually had a great breakthrough then in Bradley County.
Yes.
We did very well in Bradley, but outside of that, we came north and we
did
just
well
swept.
all over the north.
We won every northern county.
But we did. But Anderson and Roane had the populations to counteract Hamilton.
That's right.
We won by 1,700 in these two counties, and you lost by like 11 or 12 or 13. So it covered the margin. That was, there were 11 candidates in the race.
There were 11. About 3 were real, to be candid. Had a shot, but
you and Smith and Gobble were probably it.
Absolutely.
I saw Tim at an event the other night. He looks great.
He's great.
He's helping Stephen Hatchett in Bradley County.
He's
great
a
guy.
very nice man. Former Secret Service. I always tease him.
He was a sheriff.
He was a sheriff, and candidly, in our first polls, he was leading. He was leading everybody. We just never told him.
They were trying to hook me in, but I was strong.
I'll never forget that, folks. I was sitting with Alan, and he was leaning Gobble.
I knew Gobble,
and I like Gobble. Okay, Tim's a good guy, but we sat down, and you took a good couple of days and said, "Gosh, I think I'm going to give you a shot." And your wife was a big part of that.
Yeah, she's a big fan of yours, no question.
Yeah.
Now all of Anderson County's familiar with
and now everybody's a big fan of hers. That's right.
My question is, where are we going to eat? Where are we going to vote? Where are we going to? She's been very active, though. She's helped Marcia, and she's helped you, and she's done other things.
Hey, Sanford's a force. She really is.
She studies. I mean, she makes Excel graphs. Most of these people just go and throw the lever, right?
Yep.
She's got everything. She does a great job. Tell me a little bit about politics in the country. How do you see the elections going next year?
Well, I was with President Trump last night.
Right.
He will be the Republican nominee.
You think so?
Yes.
Okay.
He'll be the Republican nominee. Now I'm going to go out on a
Three-way race, right? I mean, really. You got DeSantis, and then Nikki's third at this. Well, I get a lot of support for Nikki talking on the streets. People like her. She's different.
Well, I really think
It's a money function.
It's Trump.
Oh, let's break just for a second. Tell everybody Brad came to work. Okay, go ahead.
There you go.
Okay, go ahead.
I want the Chuck Fleischmann instant replay. That's my favorite. Best idea of all time.
Right. Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
But be that as it may, I'm going to make a prediction now. I could be wrong about this. I do believe Joe Biden will be the Democratic nominee.
I think so.
I don't think they're going to replace him.
What do you do? Because we're both in the business. What do you do if you get the polling numbers and Trump's 8 points ahead everywhere over Biden? You let him roll? Well, is the Democratic machine going to let him go?
I think they do, because what they're going to say is that Biden will overperform on election day, and that's what Democrats will tell you. And I'm going to say this: I was disappointed with the elections that came out of Virginia and Kentucky. We barely won. Republicans barely won in Mississippi. I mean, we should have won by 10 points in Mississippi. We won by 4 in the governor's race. The Virginia state races were abysmal. Okay, so Youngkin, who was supposed to turn that state red, did not. And then we lost in Kentucky. Now, Republicans won every other race in Kentucky up and down the ballot other than governor, but that's the crown jewel. So as we look back, candidly, I was pleased that Republicans won the House last time, the U.S. House. But
stop right there. Okay, yeah. I mean, that's what's caused all the problems.
Yes.
If you were 15 or 20 votes up instead of 7 or 8, you wouldn't have these problems.
I predicted we'd have a 30-seat win, and I was there with the pollsters. So you talk about a disappointing
they don't poll right. I keep trying to tell them. Go ahead.
So if the Democrats are being mindful, and that's why I think it'll be Trump-Biden. I hope Trump beats Biden. Okay, let me get that out there. But if you're a Democrat, you're going to say, hey, wait a second. Republicans overall have been underperforming in a lot of national elections. So what is going to happen actually on election night? Now, great signs for Trump. He's doing very well with African-American men, with Latinos.
Men in general.
Men in general. Younger people, he's doing better. The surprise in those numbers is senior citizens still are sticking with Biden.
But here's the problem, and I've been a professional for 30 years in this business, and I'm going to tell you what the problem is. The problem is Dems know how to campaign in the last 10 days. I got a call from Georgia during the Senate race. Alan, I need some advice. What's the problem? They're in these nursing homes harvesting these votes. Yep. I said, are the nursing homes invisible? And they said no. I said, why aren't you in the nursing homes? So, I mean, my problem is not what the Democrats do. Now, I'm not talking about suspected printed ballots like we knew happened in Philadelphia and stuff, but other things. People, they just get out and work harder on election day.
They play hard.
They play hard.
And I'm going to say this.
That.
Well, I mean, they will line up. And right before we had the motion to vacate the chair, Schumer was trying to send over something to the House, and we didn't want it. We wanted to pass the House version. Every Democrat lined up with their manual voting card and slowed the process down. We were going nuts. Then they did the magic minute. One of them even pulled a fire alarm. He's pled guilty to it. So, I mean, they did not want that vote to happen. But think about that. Would I pull a fire alarm to have something go to vote on the floor? Of course not, okay? And it's not just because I mean, that took some degree, he was wrong, but it took some degree of courage that he got himself in trouble,
That's exactly
got
right.
arrested. They will do anything, and you're so right. Republicans have got to learn to fight legal, but we have really, really got to get down and fight hard because, darn it, the Dems do it. And that's what worries me about the next election cycle. I think they're going to play hard everywhere. I hope Republicans win the White House, the House, and the Senate, but rest assured, they will not go easy.
Well, you get a Democrat comes out to volunteer, or it doesn't have to be a Democrat, but a progressive, a liberal, a cause.
They're believers.
I was a believer. So, I mean, you get out there for a cause, and the first thing a kid asks you is, where do I jump on the sword? How do I help the cause?
That's exactly.
A Republican wants to know whether they're making 15 or 17 an hour.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
That's
and
true.
That's the two mods. And so you don't get as many, you don't get as much. And I respect both those opinions. I'm just saying that's the difference. I don't know. I mean, I think there's such a cultural divide, and there's such a polarization of cultures, whether it be the traditional, you see how quick from COVID and from people kneeling in football games, all that went away in 3 years. Now we're having all the patriotism and everything's back.
Sure.
Because it's not profitable to do that.
Understood.
And things are rolling and they're moving. I just think that you can almost take it down. We say 8 states. We can probably get lower than that at this point.
Probably 6.
Yeah, Colorado's a Democratic state now. It used to be a swing state.
But
Virginia's a
Ohio-
Democratic state.
That's right.
But Ohio's a Republican.
And so is Florida.
That's right. So now we got
That's right.
Pennsylvania.
Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, New Mexico.
That's it.
Probably New Hampshire.
Vermont, maybe. New Hampshire, New Hampshire.
New Hampshire. No, Vermont will be. They got Bernie Sanders. They went way left. I remember when Vermont, I'm dating myself, in the early 80s had a far right-wing senator, one of the most conservative in the country.
Name?
Oh, I
can't remember either. We're getting that age.
Yeah. He was in his 80s then.
Yeah. He ain't around then, is he?
Yeah. He made Strom Thurmond and Jesse Helms look liberal. He was so conservative. But
I'm seeing a lot of anti-aging in the polling. I see a lot of people that don't want to hear from people mid-70s and older. I mean, there's been too many photo bombs of people that are struggling when we're older to get things done. And I don't think they want a new representation. Let me ask you a question. Let me set one up for you. Gavin Newsom versus DeSantis. Who wins? Tough.
It won't happen, but DeSantis. And I'll tell you why. Unfortunately, Gavin Newsom, who's very intelligent, he's a very handsome fellow, has had such radical left-wing policies. He attacked the state of Tennessee the other day. Nationally, he was wrong. He said that there was a city in Tennessee where you could not be gay and it was punished criminally, and the reality it was not, and that was all addressed legislatively. He's got to take that back. But it made national news. I forget the city. It was a city in Middle Tennessee that had an ordinance that said you couldn't expose yourself. Okay, and that ordinance is still in place.
Sure.
So
he oversteps his mouth sometimes.
He does, but they do that. But
is he the only Dem that could run nationwide?
No.
Who else is that?
I think they've got. I don't want them to win.
We got that covered.
But the governor of Michigan has had some success.
Is it still the lady that was there?
Yes,
Okay.
Whitmer. Her predecessor was the
DOE.
Was the DOE Granholm, Secretary of Energy. But they've got a bench of governors. Whether or not they can pull somebody out of the Senate.
We don't hear much about governors.
We'll see. Now, Republicans have a bench. We're not seeing all the bench now because we're just seeing the bench that is willing to come out against Donald Trump, and a lot of them have failed. I mean, I was with President Trump last night. His poll numbers are through the roof.
They're
great.
great.
He's beating DeSantis by 70 points.
People tell me all the time, well, you got to get away. I'm saying, I'm sorry, but I just polled the 10th Judicial District, Bradley to Polk, 75% for Trump.
Yep.
I mean, it's through the roof.
Yep, but you've narrowed it down. I think 6, maybe 7 swing states, all of which are competitive, and
But
either
the
one
Rust
can win.
Belt gets it. Pennsylvania over to Michigan
Yes.
to Wisconsin. Those are the areas.
That's right.
Because
And,
I don't think a Dem can win Florida.
Yep.
I don't think a Republican can win Colorado.
That is correct.
Yeah,
and
I think we're going to.
not right now. And then, of course, I'm going to say this, Nevada and New Mexico and Arizona could be swing states.
Well, I think they have been for a while. New Mexico has been more Democratic.
It has, but Republicans could win there.
I'm worried about the House. The president will figure something out.
I'm worried about the House.
That's why I'm worried about that.
And let me say this. Being a chairman, to everyone here, whether you're a Republican or Democrat or Independent, when I can take that pen out, and I've done it, whether it's for UPF, whether it's for Chickamauga Lock, whether it's
can help
for
the district.
anything, I help the district, I help the state, I speak to the governor on a regular basis, I talk to our other members, and they basically say, Chuck, can you help me with this? Done. My degree of seniority and ability to do that as chairman of the Energy and Water Subcommittee, one of the 12 cardinals, and then interact with all the other cardinals. Right. So it works very well, all the other subcommittee chairs. That has really helped. If we fall into the minority, I become a ranking member. Again. And that means I lose a tremendous amount of ability to help the state
So
of
we
Tennessee.
need Republicans elected. And
That's
Tennessee's really not an issue, although
it will be 8-1.
You know, the fifth will always be a close race.
Closer, but given the redistricting, and candidly, Davidson County was cut up 3 ways.
Yep.
So the Democratic, that was Cooper's district, the Democrats kind of got parsed out, if you will,
Yeah, sure.
and blended into.
Instead of being
Republican
two-thirds in one area, you're a third of all
That's right.
three areas.
That's
That's right. That's right.
And watch redistricting all over the United States. Let's have a serious conversation about this. New York is going to redistrict. That can't be good for Republicans, okay? The Liberal Court of Appeals, the highest court in New York, struck down a Democratic map before the last election, and that really, really helped Republicans. What's happened, that court has changed. They've got some new, more progressive members. Dems think that they can run another bad map for Republicans there, and the court will accept it. Very interesting. Alabama and Louisiana are going to lose a Republican seat because the United States Supreme Court came in and said that they needed to create another majority African American district. So North Carolina is going to be good for Republicans. We're going to be a redistricting there. We could pick up about 4 seats. But there will be some areas where we lose. Also, the other thing that's hurting Republicans, and it's there, and people look at me like I'm strange when I talk about it, Alan, is weighted voting. And thank goodness you don't have to. Yeah. They've got it in Massachusetts. They've got it in Maine. And what that means for our listeners, if Chuck and Alan and Sabra and Caleb were all running for Congress, okay, and you would vote on your ballot, maybe 1 for me, and then 2nd for Alan, 3rd for Sabra, 4th for Caleb. Well, if Alan gets more second place votes for me in terms of points, but I've got more total first place votes, if he's got more points, he wins. That has actually happened in Maine. I've got a friend, Bruce Poliquin, he actually lost a seat. He won on election day, but he lost in a weighted voting. We're seeing that in Alaska. So that is a modern progressive trend. God forbid it ever come to Tennessee.
Chandler, let's take another break and then we'll finish up.
Daniel Forrester has been trusted by Anderson County families for nearly 2 decades. Daniel has appeared in Anderson County Chancery, Circuit, Sessions, and Juvenile Court thousands of times over the past decade. A Rule 31 mediator, Daniel has been trusted to mediate hundreds of cases across Anderson County. A community leader, Daniel has worked closely with local officials to make Anderson County a better place. A conservative and dedicated husband and father, Daniel's faith has shaped his character and integrity. On March 5th, vote Daniel Forrester for Anderson County Chancellor.
We should never lose sight of our health. To keep moving forward, let's not forget everything we've learned. Limit the salty food options. Make your own daily exercise routine. And always receive regular checkups. More than anything, we have learned how important these small steps can make a big difference. So we can all continue to move forward together.
All right, crew, let's get started. All right.
Don't ignore the law. You must call 811 at least 2 to 3 days before any digging project so you can avoid hitting our essential buried utilities. For digging projects big or small, make the call to 811.
From Oak Ridge, Tennessee, IB3 Global Solutions conducts operations around the world to enhance the U.S. national security posture and minimize radiological and nuclear threats. IB3 Global Solutions. Mission first.
At Navarro, we partner with our clients to advance clean energy and deliver effective solutions for complex challenges in the nuclear and environmental fields.
Fan Gear Barn is Oak Ridge's source for new and vintage sports fan gear from around the world of sports. Find your favorite team gear at Fan Gear Barn, located at 977 Oak Ridge Turnpike, across from the hospital. Open 10 a.m. to 7 p.m., 6 days a week. Closed on Sundays.
Welcome back to our final segment of Between the Lines. We're talking about all things domestic in the United States budget with Congressman Fleischmann. Congressman, what we're going to spend these last 10 minutes talking about?
Anything you wish.
Yeah.
As you know, Alan, I love the city of Oak Ridge. I love Anderson and Roane counties. I didn't live here. This is an area that when I came to Congress, I had to learn the subject matter, and I have literally become, if you will, an expert on all the different things that we do here.
Yeah, you have been. And your reputation in Congress by everybody, including Kevin, everybody, is that you're the most knowledgeable energy person up there. But you study.
And Democrats will say that too. If you sit down, Secretary Granholm or Ernie
Mexico,
Moniz,
what was his name? Senator
Lujan. I saw him the other day.
Lujan made you co-chair when he didn't have to.
And we gave a national lab speech together. I was a Republican. He was the Democrat. ORNL was there. All the labs were there just this past week. And he stood up in front of that audience and just told them just how good I was on this. And I feel good about that because there needs to be times where we step back from that partisan brink and say, okay, let's talk about policy. What is good policy and why? And in so many areas, nuclear legacy.
Right. There's no Democrats or Republicans in the trenches.
Yeah.
They're helmets and guns.
Yeah. Well,
that's right. And the defense industry's got a little bit of that taste. You've got to work together.
Yes, and we've seen that. But nuclear legacy cleanup is so important. Our new designs for nuclear reactors, I am making sure that as fission moves forward, as fusion moves forward, as our clean energy endeavors move forward, that Oak Ridge remains the preeminent actor in that. We are number one. I want to keep us there, and I will keep us there. Now, does that mean I don't like the others? No, I've been very fair to Idaho and to Sandia and all these other, went down to Savannah River and stuff like that. But when I walk in, you know what they say? Here comes the guy from Oak Ridge.
Yeah.
That's what's great.
It's the Eric Cantor story, remember?
Yes.
I want to talk about commitments to campaigning just for a second.
Sure.
41 years ago, I sat in Littleton, Colorado, on a couch in a display room with Charlie Ergen and a couple other people. We were all working for Ecosphere and Dish in those days, and they still are. But we're all sitting around, we're looking, and we were reading the article about Bobby Sands in Ireland prison. And remember that summer '81? He actually...
Is this the hunger striker?
He was the hunger striker.
Yeah.
Who died after 56 days or 58 days protesting British treatment of Irish. And I was sitting there, and I said, man, we were talking about it, and he made a good point, and he's made a lot of good points to me over the years.
Who, Ergen?
Charlie, yeah.
He's
great. He made a good point. He said, who do you know that would make that kind of commitment to something? Yeah. And I thought of it right then, and that's kind of what I'm saying is that you're either all in or you're not all in. And so many of the inner city campaigners and the other people, they're all in. Not that in, but they're all in. And all my life, I've always thought of Bobby Sands at different points in my life because I'm an IRA, but starving himself. But I always thought about, and he comes back to The Godfather. When Michael's walking down the road, he sees the guy jump in the car and kills himself and blows up a couple of soldiers.
That's right.
He pulls off the deal. And he says, they're just crazies. That's what he tells him, Hyman tells him. But Michael says, what does that tell you? And he says, what does that mean, Michael? He means they can win.
They may win.
And that's all right. And that's exactly why that is. So that's why you got to get more votes on the other side. And you think people don't think cognitively. I see an opponent put up a thing on the website, has 700,000 words in it. Nobody's reading it. It's got to be a snapshot. It's got to be something that people can relate to in 30 seconds or less, and that's it.
Sure.
And I hope that we, with our values and Tennessee values, I hope we can grow that kind of commitment and really try to work hard. It's hard because we know we're going to win here. Trump's going to win by 30 points. So that's what do we do day in and day out? And you raise money. You can do a lot of people here bus to Virginia to work. And, they bus to Georgia to work. A lot of people are volunteer. Georgia's still a 50-50 state. Wouldn't you say Georgia's on the flip?
Yes, I do think Donald Trump can win Georgia.
Yeah, it's legitimately will.
Yes. And I will say this, with Stacey Abrams' power and influence waning, and that has waned,
what is her time?
Her time?
Stacey Abrams. What is she?
Well, she's lost twice, and now I don't know what she's doing, but that very potent, powerful get out the vote.
It was very effective.
Was very effective. But Georgia, I think, will be in play. But other cities, other states will not. But you're talking about the commitment, And that's why I'm talking to young voters all the time about that. And I say, look, you won't always agree with me, but this is how I feel. And I said, test me on these things. I talk about belief in God, belief in country, belief in national defense. These are the things that we in East Tennessee, and we live in a very conservative part of the country. But rest assured.
In the best part of Tennessee.
And the best part of Tennessee. I love our whole state, and I help the whole state, but you're right. Having said that, I deal with people every day who live in different parts of the country. Now, some of these areas are somewhat blended. I've got some friends who serve on Long Island who are Republicans. They're not as conservative as I am, and they'll tell me, look, Chuck, I can't be. I will not win if I vote like you vote in East Tennessee. However, I'm not going to vote like the crazy Dems do over here because they're winning over here because their parts of Long Island and New York are rejecting that radical left-wing ideology and ethos and the like.
Let me ask you this. When I was a child, since we only have 3 or 4 minutes,
Sure.
When I was a child, the Jewish community was 90% Democrat. I can remember as a young man in New York. And
95% Democrat.
Student,
Yep.
What's the balance today?
Wow. It is still heavily Democratic, but Republican-Jewish coalition is growing. When I see the Democratic Party in a recent poll, this is sickening, 46% of Democrats were supporting Palestine and Hamas. And it made me sick.
President Biden came out after a visit and said a 2-state's the only answer. I can't remember exactly what he said.
Yeah, at first he came out very, very strong pro-Israel, and I was very pleased with his rhetoric, as I was with Blinken's. But look, I'm 100% pro-Israel. They are our ally. I know Netanyahu. I've been to the Holy Land. If you haven't gone, go. I went as a Catholic, but
Don't go this year.
Everybody. Yeah. No, as a matter of fact, I was set to go, and they didn't let us go. But the Old Testament sites there, I've got a lot of friends in the Orthodox Jewish community, wonderful, wonderful people. Let me tell you this, our Jewish friends are scared. And if you know somebody who is Jewish, please have a talk with them. Listen to them, console them, let them know that we will never allow anti-Semitism to take root and have anything similar to what they went through in the Holocaust. They're scared now because that rhetoric is there. It's on college campuses. It's in some corporate boardrooms. Some of the statements that have been made, we need to call that out. I've been shocked. But yes, Republicans, again, will probably do better in the Jewish community. But traditionally, and I've lived in New York, Philadelphia, and Chicago at different times before I came here, large Jewish populations, overwhelmingly Democratic. I think that's going to change now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the great, who's the OJ's attorney? Dershowitz.
Yes.
Dershowitz, big time switch.
Yes, constitutional lawyer, very bright, but yes, has made that transition. And so that's...
you have to be, I'll let it go real quick, but if you, a people without a country in 1945, a people displaced by a mad dictator, eliminated a third of the world population, I believe it was, of the Jewish population, and they're looking for a home, and they get a home in 47 and 48, they find a home.
The United States, Harry Truman, within the first 15 or 20 minutes, recognized Israel.
Righteous.
Yes, good move. They've been our ally, and what happened? In 48, the Arabs attacked. Israel won, gained more ground. In 67, the Arabs really attacked, and then Israel won big and got even more land, including the Sea of Galilee, which is a big lake. The Romans called it Lake Tiberias, actually, but it is. They had that. Then the Yom Kippur War, they attacked poor Israel again. Israel won again, and we've held them back. But this Hamas attack was just staggering and
Has
horrible.
Israel had enough retaliation? Tens of thousands are dying over there.
No, they've got to secure that and get rid of Hamas. And with Hamas being embedded, some of the stories coming out...
They're going house to house. Is that what's taking so long?
Yes. And you have to remember, you look to the north, where Hezbollah is in Lebanon.
We got to cut. We got 25 seconds left. We're going to come back next week and talk more international.
Sure.
But tell me anything you want to say. Happy Thanksgiving, right?
Happy Thanksgiving. Still the greatest, strongest nation in the world, and thank you for the privilege of letting me be your congressman.
Go Vols, wherever we go.
Go Vols. Beat Vandy.
There you go.